Yeah, I'm Scott Pittendrigh. I work as a government economist for the Government of Canada. I have a couple of graduate degrees from the University of Aberdeen. Uh, my particular interest is in the economics of energy and finance of energy and its impact on the Canadian economy. Um, Aberdeen is an excellent place to certainly begin for this focus of study. And certainly it's an excellent research institution where you can engage leading minds in your chosen area.
Thank you very much. And the first question is, what were some of your favorite courses and electives during your time at University of Aberdeen?
Favorite courses. I have to admit, I enjoyed almost all of them. All of them, in fact. I have favorite lecturers. One of them was Angela Black from the business school, particularly very insightful about debates that are raging in finance right now about asset pricing. Some of the best feedback I've ever had in terms of essays and writing, I got from her. She really stood out. I also have a graduate data science diploma from them. And again, the diversity of courses and thinking from the faculty was very beneficial.
Yes.
So they didn't emphasize, for example, coding as you would expect in a computer science program. Rather, they emphasized the intellectual processes behind coding and computational thinking over the mechanics of computation, which in the longer term, and I didn't graduate that long ago, but there's been tremendous changes in the field. It has proven invaluable. It's made me more resilient to changes in the job market
Yes.
and the field. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you very much for your response. And the next question is, were there any particular obstacles or challenges that you faced during your time at University of Aberdeen, and how you dealt with them?
Well, while I was studying, I was looking after parents who are well into their 90s and working full time. Fortunately, my employer was flexible enough that I could manage it. It really proved emotionally and physically challenging to balance all three. I also found that, when you go to Aberdeen, you should expect other students the students there to be very bright, and it takes work to keep up with them. You can't shirk your readings. If you're somebody that simply reproduces the work as per what you've seen in a lecture, or can spit back material mechanically, I think you'll find the place very frustrating. At minimum, they want a lot of critical thinking. At minimum, they want you to reapply things in new circumstances and in critical ways, and to explore the foundations, limits, and possibilities of the concepts they teach. there is a strong bias towards writing at the university, which is good on one hand, because not only are you expected to understand the computational and mathematical foundations of what you're studying, but you're expected to be able to express it in a written form that's clear. And that's certainly proved invaluable. And it's certainly helped to refine my thinking.
Yes.
Anyway, I will let you ask the next question.
Thank you very much for your response. And the next question is, did you engage in any student organizations or clubs during your time in Aberdeen?
Because I was working full-time and dealing with parents in Canada that were rather elderly, and getting through my course, and I did manage to get through my courses in a timely fashion. I was rather constrained for time and sleep. If I had one regret and I wasn't working, I would have done that. The student base there is phenomenal. There's people from everywhere studying everything, and the debates, the insights are really, in my mind, very, challenge the outer limits of my thinking.
Yes.
And this was the best part about Aberdeen, is they will take you to the very edge of your abilities. And, I know where I can build and continue to build strength and push. And I know and I'm very clear on areas where I'm weak. And, there is the flexibility within the program to certainly proceed forward and build on your strengths and focus on them and move forward. You're not, and they're very realistic about that. You're there to build on your particular interests, strengths, and focus, and there are the resources to do so there. The other thing they emphasize is that a lot of it is up to you. It's between you and that book, and you and that argument, and you and that concept, and you're responsible for getting those tools to resolve those problems.
Yes, absolutely. And then moving on to the next question. Are there any lifelong friendships or connections that you made during your time in Aberdeen?
A few. Yeah, there was certainly a couple. As an older student, I certainly managed to interact with a banker from Edinburgh. We were fast friends, probably because of our similar perspectives and experiences. And a few from Southern Africa as well. And, frankly, they have very much broadened my perspective on things. It's always fun from my perspective to interact with the younger students. I remember when I was, first entering university, and everything was very fresh and very new, and if I could give anybody any advice, it's relish those times. You're going to learn as much from your colleagues and your peers as you will in the classroom. And I'm not saying that that there's anything deficient in classroom learning or what you'll learn from your tutors. It's just going to be a lot. It's the critical mass of smart people who are interested in doing things and interested in what they're studying at Aberdeen is profound.
Yes.
And that's the real advantage of the place, is the sheer critical mass of what's going on.
Yes.
So anyway, go ahead.
Thank you. What were your career aspirations while attending University of Aberdeen and upon finishing it? How did they change?
Um, well, I was relatively set into my career. I had a considerable experience in the government of Canada as an economist. Before that, I had studied at Canadian institutions. And for me, Aberdeen was about, because a lot of my career changed around 2008 during the banking crisis. Before that, I was focused on a good deal of analysis of what banks were doing, why they were doing it. Excuse me. The attitude of most government regulators was hands off, let the free market prevail. By the time the crisis hit, the attitude had shifted because so much was on the responsibility of the public sector to bail out banks and see the economy through that crisis. That suddenly I was in the midst of a bit of a crash course in understanding things like mortgage-backed securities and credit default swaps and the regulation of these activities. I ended up moving positions after that and becoming more and more interested in the aspects of these for public sector real estate purchases and interactions with banking. And my job became more and more research oriented. And I needed more background in finance. So I took the degree. I also had a spate as an executive and honestly did not like it. And found that being a researcher, paid very close to what I would have earned as an executive. And I found it a lot less stressful and a lot more agreeable. And my ideas were in more demand.
Yeah.
So and Aberdeen helped me to regain or gain confidence in my ideas and my approach to a lot of problems that had, in my mind, taken a more intuitive approach. And they gave me the confidence to apply mathematical and computational methods to these problems that a lot of people weren't familiar with. And I ended up coming up with far more rigorous results and bearing more influence than I expected. That's really where it's gone. I am persisting more and more with research. And that's certainly where I intend to go. After I finished my MSc in finance at Aberdeen, and I finished a postgraduate diploma in data science on the heels of it. And I even went back and I'm finishing up an applied degree in econometrics at Lancaster with a bent towards data science to augment those skills. I would dearly love to return to Aberdeen again. It is a much more collegial atmosphere than a lot of institutions, and I certainly enjoyed it. Part of my rationale for choosing Aberdeen, and this was not particularly rational, was that my grandfather is from there.
Really?
And my great-grandfather attended the university. And they immigrated to Canada quite a while ago. And now, of course, they studied things like studied theology. Um, and it was always held up as an aspirational institution to me. So the idea of going there was always seen as, yeah, it's like, I suppose, like buying a Bentley or buying a Porsche. It's a great thing to have. It excels at what you do, and the advantage of education is, unlike one of those depreciating assets, it appreciates over time. Despite my sort of mid-career journey to Aberdeen, it certainly has it's paid off in terms of me getting work that I find more interesting. Where I go after this, who knows? So we'll find out.
Yeah, thank you very much for your response. It's very interesting. And the next question is, what are some key factors that kept you motivated during your time at University of Aberdeen?
Sheer interest in the topics. I don't know if I would have been like this initially as a student with no work experience, but when I came there, I was very keenly aware of how banks functioned, how financial markets functioned. And I'd been on the regulatory side of seeing how they could get dysfunctional fast if the regulations were not implemented or thought out carefully. So there was a reality that I had in the back of my head as I approached these things. On one hand, it left me a little closed-minded to some positions. On the other hand, it made it very clear to me that I could certainly see how things would work and how things would be applied and their strengths and weaknesses. Ironically, I ended up gaining an even more in-depth grounding in the ideas that predated the financial crisis, particularly efficient markets theory and other very mathematical bents towards understanding financial markets. Simply because there's so much literature that left immediate application of these ideas. And as a regulator and a one-time participant outside of government, one of the things you're always facing is limited time and limited information and limited insight. And using those very empirically sound tools is always, in my experience, has been a best option and hasn't harmed me much. Staying motivated, it really wasn't a problem. The biggest problem I had was simply there just wasn't enough hours in the day to read all the material I wanted to read or have all the conversations I wanted to have. I was a little exhausted after I finished, to say the least. Probably I should have taken a long break, but that's not in the offing. I found answering those questions and pursuing those ideas more important than leisure activities. So, that's essentially, I really shouldn't ramble on. But anyway, you have another question?
Yes, thank you very much for your response. And the next question, could you please describe your responsibilities in your current role?
My current role, I analyze labor market sectors in Western Canada, which is a particularly energy dependent portion of the Western Canadian economy. Despite efforts of years of economic diversification, negative oil price shocks always reverberate through job markets here and labor market outcomes. So you may not be directly related to oil here and oil prices and energy prices, but it eventually affects you. What I do is I increasingly use machine learning to examine how various events affect career prospects, labor market outcomes, and compensation in Western Canada. And the advantage is that the background I gained at Aberdeen allows me considerable insight into what's going on. So, and a strong theoretical base. Moreover, what it's given me is the confidence to extend various approaches that are not necessarily conventional, but highly defensible and very reasonable in this context. I'm not going to become a multimillionaire or set the world on fire by doing this, but it's very interesting, and I would like to think that my insights are certainly helping Canadians and policymakers set economic frameworks that are benefiting everybody. And I've also, in between jobs, I stepped out of the government of Canada for a bit. I found that studying at Aberdeen gave me the contacts to pick up contracts with folks in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East that had similar questions about things like energy price volatility. And, as to be expected, outside of government, you do far better than you do inside. But the questions were very interesting, and there seemed to be a lot of awareness of the specialties that people developed and gained from interactions at Aberdeen, and they're very interested in building on it. And they're very interested in at least what I had to say. So, it's certainly been good. Honestly, I don't think I expected when I started with the Government of Canada to be here this long. I started off in consulting. What I appreciate about it is that it's so interesting, and they have supported me in researching and focusing on areas that would never be examined in the private sector, because there's just no way you could turn a profit doing it, but they're vital for understanding what's going on. And certainly Aberdeen has built my skills to understand that. Probably the most important thing is because of the very dialogue-based approach to examining your papers, where it's just not a matter of them looking at your paper and assigning you a mark. They focus very clearly on every argument, and you're challenged every step of the way. So you're forced to examine your assumptions, you're forced to examine context of what you're saying and how it might be interpreted. And in terms of financial and economic theory, I gained a lot more insight in how to defend and articulate that in different venues from my experience there. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your response. Very interesting. And the next question is that university is a stressful time for students. What advice would you give to students currently dealing with stress?
Well, in retrospect, I can't say I've been the best at handling stress myself, but in retrospect, put things into perspective. This is one piece in a larger puzzle you're attempting. It is not the end of the world. One of the interesting things about the UK is that a lot of what's done is high stakes. Like you get your A levels before you go to university, and you get into university and you're writing a huge exam towards the end of your undergraduate. Ironically, that approach really served me well. The graduate schools and the courses taught in the graduate schools, from what I saw, were a lot closer to what I experienced in North America. The thing to remember, I think the thing to remember is that the difference between one grade, a first class, or a merit, or a distinction, is not going to make a lot of difference in 2 years after you graduate. If you go on to graduate school and you got some extra experience, you can get into that and move on. It is one touch point of what you've done. Now, having said that, as one sample, the exam does not begin. Exams and scrutiny does not begin in the exam room. It begins the day you touch down there. And the choices you make, certainly study and study hard and attend your lectures. But the other part is choose your friends carefully. They are going to be your lifelong contacts, buddies, support system. If you can, get married there. You're not going to encounter such a concentration of very bright, very capable, very open-minded people anywhere else. The average is going to drop after you leave an institution like that. And the more you hang on to those social networks and the more you build them, the better off you're going to be. And I'm not saying that, the reality is I found there's always a few people that figure they can exploit them and they're going to get something from them. I always find that by participating and offering what I can offer, which is usually the things that I'm good at, which is research and sort of sober second thoughts, you tend to get a lot back. Some of my more entrepreneurial colleagues have given me a lot more insight into the work worlds they have pursued, and I haven't had to be there to directly learn the lessons. And I very much value their friendship. The other issue is we don't talk about work a lot, very little, in fact. It's many other things, but their perspectives and their values, whether it's being, in terms of pursuing their hobbies and their personal lives, they're very inspirational. It augments views of the world that I have. Maybe it's a selection bias, but it's certainly those relationships you will form that get you through those stressful years will be important for the rest of your life. So getting back to your original question, how do you manage stress? Try to eat well, get your sleep, get your exercise, socialize, and keep it in perspective. Nothing is the end of the world. It seems so when you're young. That first big relationship, if it goes sour, it seems like you're never going to meet anybody else. I remember a stats professor, me bemoaning that I didn't think I'd meet anybody like somebody who had just left me. And he said, that's statistically impossible. If that was the case, the planet would grind to a halt. It's very likely you'll find somebody else. Well, at the time it didn't make a lot of sense, but in fact I felt at the time it was a little calloused, but the reality is that he was what I learned from him was how to take statistical reasoning and apply it across various sections of life to understand what was a matter of a concern and what wasn't. And university appears to be filled with what I would call type 1 decisions, where you go through a door and you can't go back. There's more opportunity to return and go through different doors than a lot of people see, which is type 2 decisions, where you can go through it, try it out, and do it again. Do as much of type 2 as you can, be it in student politics or starting a business or learning a new language or whatever. Do as much as you can. Freedom to fail is a great thing. Because at the end of the day, when you're selling yourself, you have to talk about your successes. So anyway, we'll leave it there.
Thank you very much for your response. We've got 2 more questions.
Sure.
First question is, many students struggle with transition from academia world to professional world. What advice would you give to students struggling with it?
This was a big problem of mine, and I would argue that I've never really made the transition. You have to look at your own nature too. What do you do? Who are you? At basic, I'm a guy who looks at phone books full of numbers and can put together a narrative on causation and direction and where they're going. That's very valued. Although on many other levels people will tend to underestimate me, when you've got that skill set and you're sitting in a poker game that's commercial, people take notice. Other people have other talents. The wonderful thing about Aberdeen is when I was there were people that were multilingual. That was very common, in fact. All sorts of insights into all sorts of areas, be it computer science or just human nature, or people with startlingly acute social skills and public speaking skills. All of them went on to build upon those skills and advance their careers. I even studied with somebody who was a professional basketball player.
Really?
At first I wasn't sure what was going on, and I suddenly realized that the immense stamina and focus that it takes to be a professional athlete is not something to be trifled with in a world where the barrage of work and the hours can be incredible. He's gone on and done incredibly well in financial services. The transition is hard because the workplace will see it may seem a lot less exciting and mundane. I know my first job, my very first job out of undergraduate, I was canned out of fairly quickly, and I went on to start a software firm. And then I went consulting, and then I went into the government of Canada. And all of those choices were made on the basis of, is it interesting? Now, I've made a few choices on the basis of things other than it being interesting, like, can I rise up the hierarchy? When I do it like that, it's the wrong choice. it doesn't fit me. If I'm doing something because it's intellectually interesting, I understand the people, I understand the processes, I understand the outcome, they fit intuitively. The academic sort of workplace transition is meaningless. You're producing results. There are a few things I can remember, because I hit the workplace after some graduate studies in Canada. And, as a graduate student, to take a nap in the middle of the day, that's not such a bright idea to do in the middle of an international consulting firm. But, and you'll adjust accordingly. But don't be too upset or concerned. Find your niche, do what you're good at, and focus in on it. And be creative as much as you can. There's no way success is going to come by you defining the terms and pursuing something that you're really good at and where you can create value for other people. Mine happens to be in terms of crunching numbers and explaining what it means for people's decisions. And, other people, my God, they can lead them, they can charm them, they can inspire them. And there's different ways at different things, and all take different disciplines. And the workplace that accommodates very bright people and exploits their talents to advance will recognize that. If you hit a workplace where, and there's many of them like that, because most of them are like that, where they're just trying to pound you into as a square peg into a round hole, to make sure that you run on time to make your watch work, I'd probably suggest that most Aberdeen students can do better. I know initially I didn't find what I was looking for. I started a company, sold it, became a consultant to help other people.
It's 10 o'clock.
Sorry, that's my computer clock. And moved on from there. I really defined my own niche. So that's my long answer around that. I'm not the best person to advise on it, but I would certainly encourage people to take an entrepreneurial bent on this one and to focus in on what they do. Anyway.
Thank you very much for this advice. And the last question is, if you could go back in time, would you change anything about your time as a student at University of Aberdeen, or would you give yourself any advice?
I as a person, I'm not terribly retrospective because I can't do that. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I think probably the most important thing is showing up and just being ready to learn from your colleagues, from your people, from your peers, from your professors. The libraries there are short of fantastic. There is an energy services sector there with opportunities that abound. And not be afraid to stretch your wings. Simply because you've done an undergraduate, let's say, in theology, doesn't mean you should be frightened not to carry on in computer science. Push yourself into various areas. Don't be afraid to take risks and move forward. A lot of hard areas that seem initially challenging. This is probably counterintuitive advice to a lot of people. I remember as an undergraduate, for example, not being dissuaded from an incredibly hard math class or an incredibly hard class, but taking it and bearing down and trying to get through it. And although I might have not done really well initially, as time went on, I caught on and did very well. And that is applicable to many other areas. Anybody who knew me my younger years would have never thought that I would have run a marathon. Well, through persistence, I ended up doing it and running at incredible distances every day. If you're systematic about things and focused, you can do a lot more than you might expect.
Thank you very much for your answers, for the advices you provided us with. It was splendid. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're most welcome, and best of luck. Primary thing, all I can say is use your own rational faculties and instincts, and you'll be fine.